Hey, hi everyone. Good morning. Hi Akhil. Hi Balaji. Hi Kandru. I'm Sanjeev Rao. Please add me to the. Okay. Hey, hi Deepthi. Hi Marcos. Hi Fatima. Hi Deepak. Sandrine, Manikandan, Lohita, Dawn, Aruna, Aftab, Sandeep, Carlos, Harsha, Rajesh, Abhi, Abhay, Siva, Subalakshmi, Bhavesh. Okay, so Marcos, mm, and I think someone else also asked about Telegram group. You will find a link to join the Telegram group in the announcement tab. So if you go to the class page, right, on in the inside the class page, I think you will have three tabs. There is an about tab where I have basically given all the description of the class, and then the next tab is announcement, and next is additional content. I think under additional content you will basically find all the attachment, and under announcements you would basically find two different links. Basically, you can use any link to join Telegram. Have you tried that? Okay, so if you tried the link and if it doesn't work, then you can do one thing. You can just message me in Discord, like just message me personally in Discord, and then I will. Then maybe you can share me your Telegram username or your phone number, so I can manually add you. Okay. Okay. So Tim says no sound today. Tim, you cannot hear me, is it? Is there anyone else who is not able to hear me? Okay. So, Tim, can you try maybe just restarting the browser or maybe using some other browser? Okay, fine. So, we'll just give another 3 to 4 minutes for others to join. If you have any questions, you can ask me until then, and then we'll start with today's class. Okay. So, Naveen, you shared your phone number. You need to join to Telegram, is it? Okay. Please show us how to download CSV file. What does truncate command do? Okay. We will cover truncate today. Okay, Akhil. Uh, how to download CSV file? I think you mean to say how to import a CSV file into the database, right? If that's your question, we will cover that a little later in the class. Okay, when I'll be taking some data sets from the internet or some other data sets which may be in a CSV file format, I'll then show you how you can upload it into your database. Okay, we'll not do that now, but I'll do that when that particular topic comes. Today is my first. Okay, that's fine. So Ravi, if today is your first session, and if anyone else who is watching this, you're basically joined the class just now. I would suggest that you go back and start from the very first session, the recordings. Of course, you can watch this session if you're already present here. But if you're watching the recording, I would say first go and watch the first session and then come back. Then just go sequentially. Okay. But of course, if you already know all the basics of SQL, then you don't have to watch the previous sessions. Because I understand there are some people here who already are aware of all the basics. But of course, there is no harm in learning something again, right? You never know, you might learn something that you might not know before. Okay, so this what topics are we going to cover today? I'm going to tell that. Okay, let me just share my screen. So I hope you guys can see my screen. Let me know if you're able to see my screen. Okay. Okay, so Okay, so you guys can see my screen, right? Okay, so now in so far we have basically covered all the introductions to SQL database, everything. We have then seen. I just gave you an overview of all the SQL commands, but I did not go in depth. And then we started with DDL commands. We have seen all the DDL commands, and we have seen these constraints. Okay, and then we did see some inserts because I wanted to explain this foreign key and primary key concept. That is why we had seen this statement. Okay, in today's class, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to start with one more new constraint that was recently added in PostgreSQL, and I think we have similar things supported in other RDBMS, and that is the identity column. Okay, so the identity generated by identity constraint. Okay, so I'm just going to see that basically how you can make most of the time your primary key columns. We would always make it like auto generated. So we'll see how to do that. Okay, I'm going to start with that. And then we will look at the DML commands. All of these four DML commands. We'll cover this TCL commands. Many people were asking about save point from the very first session. So we will be covering that. And we'll also see delete and truncate because I did not cover truncate previously. So we'll see that truncate and delete and the difference between them today. We'll then cover the DCL commands, and then we will get into writing basic SQL queries. Okay, so today's plan is we'll complete all of this. Okay, and then if time persists or if there is time still remaining, then we will look at some basic SQL queries. Okay, I have a simple data set, and I'll also show you a method of how you can generate your own data set very easily, how you can generate thousands of records with meaningful data set very easily through the internet. Okay, so that is what I have planned for today. And once that is done for today, in the tomorrow's session, we will get into writing all the basic SQL queries. So we will cover all the different types of operators. Okay, everything I will be covering with the example of some writing SQL queries. Okay, we will also look at the case statement, the union operators, and all of these commands. So hopefully, in the next session, we will be able to cover all of this, and then maybe not only next session but the next two sessions I will cover all of these concepts, and then we will try to solve several SQL queries. Okay, so that's the plan hopefully for this week. By the end of this week, you should be able to completely be comfortable with all the SQL commands and how they work, and you should be able to you should also be comfortable in writing basic SQL queries, and you should have, I will provide you some assignments to solve some basic SQL queries. Okay, so from the next week, we'll get into the intermediate concepts. That's the plan for this entire week. Okay, I hope that is clear. Everything is already shared. This entire PDF is already shared in the attachment, so you can download it from there and you can check everything. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to start the class. So I'll just move this away. Okay, so I see 120 people here. I think that's enough. Let's start. Okay, so we have seen some constraints already. We saw check, not null, unique, primary key, and foreign key. In the last class, I was also explaining you default, another constraint called default, right? And we face some issues, right? Uh, okay, just to iterate, okay. Any questions that you have, right, regarding the class and regarding anything that I have covered so far in this entire class, you can ask it in the Q&A session. I look at the Q&A tab. I look into that tab maybe once I complete a particular topic. Okay, if you ask me a question that is unrelated to the class, or you ask me how to download a video, where can I find recordings or anything, because I have uh, mentioned this multiple times in the last three sessions, so probably someone else can help you guys. I will not try to answer these questions, okay, because I have already answered them so many times about recordings, about timings, about where you can find attachments and everything. So if no one is able to answer you, then maybe at the end of the class I'll try to help you on that. But in the middle of the class, I'm not going to take any of those questions. Anything related to the class, anything related to the course, you can ask the question in the Q&A tab and I'll answer that. Okay, So now let's come back here. Now, if you remember in the last class, I was trying to create a default constraint and I was facing some issue, right? Uh, so I realized the issue was because when I was explaining you all the different commands, I had disabled this auto commit. Okay, because I had disabled auto commit, that is why that default constraint was not working as expected. Okay, um, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to first start by explaining that default constraint once again. Okay, so let me first see how many tables I have already created. So I think we have branch employees transactions, all of these tables already created, right? So what I'm going to do is, let's say, okay, so let me take the script of this transaction table and let me try to recreate this transaction table once again. Okay, so so this is the script that I basically showed you in the last class. I just copied it from the notes file that I had shared in the last class. So this is what we had, and I have this transaction table. So what I'm going to do is, and I had created this default constraint. You can see on this column status, I gave the data type, then I said default success, right? What this basically means is when you are trying to insert some record into this particular table, if you do not if you do not insert any value into this column, then by default it will take the value that you have already set during the creation of your table. You can also set this with alter, but for now let's use create. Okay, so I'm just going to drop this table first. I have dropped it and I'm going to recreate this table. So I'm not doing, okay, when I'm recreating this table, I'll do one more thing. Okay, the second question that I saw someone ask in the Telegram group was about composite foreign key, right? We already saw composite primary key. What exactly is a composite primary key? Can anyone tell? Does anyone remember what is a composite primary key? If I'm asking some questions, I would really appreciate if you answer, and you can answer that in this particular tab. That is, what is this? The live chat tab. Okay, let's keep the Q&A only for questions. Okay, so multiple columns, combination of primary keys, as we can use combination of columns, primary key with combination of two columns, primary key composed of multiple columns. Okay, so Adam, I think Adam's answer was the most correct. Primary key composed of multiple columns. So that's, and I think combination of multiple columns. Okay, so most of you guys are right. Uh, Composite primary key basically is if you are trying to create a primary key on more than one column. Okay, it can be two column, three column, or etc. If you're trying to create a primary key on more than one column, then we kind of call it like composite primary key. If you create a primary key with just one column, then we just call it like, I think, normal primary key. Okay, so in an interview, if you are asked, and this can be a tricky question that can be asked during interviews, okay, for a beginner level role, what is a composite primary key? Okay, and they might also ask you, can you create a composite foreign key? Okay, so this is a question that I'm asking you guys. I have not explained that, but anyone here is aware, can we have composite foreign key? Do you guys know? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, yes, and that's correct. So let's try to implement that with an example. Okay, so I already have a foreign key here, and it is referencing the account number table. Okay, now the only thing is, I have already told you, whenever you are creating a foreign key, the column to which it is referencing, it has to either be a primary key or it has to be a unique key. Okay, the reason why we have this kind of a requirement is because we cannot have duplicate values in our master column, right? And that is why, only a unique key or a primary key will never have duplicate values, right? And that is why our foreign key constraint should always refer to a uh, primary key or a unique key constraint. Okay, now here account number, I feel this is a primary key column, so let me take the ddl of accounts. So this is accounts table. So I have the DDL of accounts here. So I'm just going to paste it here. Okay. I'm basically reusing the same script that I explained in the last class. Okay. So I have the accounts table here. I have created the primary key on the account. So what I'm going to do is maybe I'll drop this table. Okay, so I drop the accounts table, and then what I want to do is I want to recreate this table, but this time I'll create the primary key on two different columns so that I can then create a composite foreign key for those two columns. Okay, so since I need to create a primary key for two different columns, I cannot use this syntax, but rather what I need to do is I need to come here to the end, and here I need to create the constraint. So I'll say constraint names. I'm just going to say pk underscore account. Okay, and this is my primary key, and I need to include two different columns. So account number, and I'll include account type. Okay, and then the primary key. So constraint name primary key. Okay, that's it. So this syntax should probably work, and I have two different foreign keys. Everything is fine. So I'll create this table. Table is created, and now I'm just going to create these three records into this table. Okay. So auto commit is on, so I don't need to do a commit manually. So let me look at my accounts table. You can see I have three records here. Now I'm going to create my transaction table. So I think I already dropped the transaction table. So now when I'm creating that, I have already given a default constraint here. Second, I want to create a composite foreign key. So what I need to do here is, uh, okay, now the problem is I don't have an account type column in this table, right? So I need to have that column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new column here. So let's say account number and account type, just for the purpose of this example, okay? And I think this is a varchar, right? So I'll just copy this. I'll have it here. Okay. So I'll create an account. I'll create account type also as part of my foreign key, and the same thing has to be referenced here, right? So that's it. I hope this is clear. You let me know if I am executing anything too fast. Okay. You can ask me to stop. So you can see that I have created the table. Table creation is successful, and I have created a foreign key on two different columns. Okay. So now when I'm trying to insert some record into this table, okay, because I created a new column, I need to add that column into my insert script as well. So here I'll say savings, okay, savings, right? Yeah, savings, okay. And now if I try to insert, it has inserted, and you can see that the last column that I have added here is I have added the value success. Okay, now let's say I'm going to add another record. Okay, and I'll put it here, and let's say this one I'll make it like failure. Okay, and then I'll add another record here, and this time I'll not give any value here. So I'll say, let's say I'm going to give default. Okay, so yeah, so I'm going to give default. And now let me run the second record. I've inserted third record. Sorry, third record is inserted. Now let me look at the data in the table. Now you can see here the third record that I inserted. Okay, so you ignore this. We inserted this third record. I gave one test and this one. So one test and this one. Here I did not give any value. I just mentioned default, right? So let's say I insert another record here. So I'll say this is maybe transaction two, and this is maybe test, and everything is the same. And let's say this is 555. Okay. And if I execute this, one more record is inserted. And now if I run, you can see here, this is what a default constraint does. Okay. So I have not given a value here, but I have just mentioned the keyword default, and whatever was defined as default during your table creation, or whenever you have altered your table, that value will basically be replaced. Basically, this default will get replaced with the value that you have already given here. Okay. So this is what default does. If you ask me where is it useful, there can be certain columns, there might be certain scenarios where you would have a table, and from the UI some data would get inserted into that table, maybe account creation. So let's say for banking, new account creation, but there might be certain fields which may not be mandatory. So a customer may not it may not be mandatory for the customer to give a value. Okay, but this field may be very important for the system that basically is and basically is doing some operation. Okay, in that case, generally what we do is, it's not mandatory for the customer to give a value, but for our system we need to have at least some value in that column for whatever the reason may be. Okay, in that case, we would always have a default value in such columns, so that even the customer doesn't give a value from the UI, internally, even if it's coming as blank, we will have a default value that we will always get inserted into that column. Okay, so that is the whole purpose of having a default constraint. Okay, and you have already seen that we have created composite foreign key and it works absolutely fine. Of course, let's say if I try to insert another record here, so I'll say three test, and let's say I'm going to say 333, and instead of savings, I'll say loan. Okay, if you go into my accounts table, you see I don't have anything with account type loan, right? So if I try to insert this record, it's going to fail, telling that insert update on transaction violates the foreign key constraint. Okay, so even though the account number 12345 is actually a valid account number because 12345 is present here, but our foreign key is not created just on account number. Our foreign key is created based on the combination of these two. Okay, so that is why this particular insert is not working, it is failing. But now let's say if I go back to my accounts table, and here let's say I'll insert another record. Okay, 12345, and this time I'll insert it for the loan. What is that for the loan? Violates foreign key constraint C1. Do I have another loan account key? Account type. Okay, okay. I think here this account type is again referencing another table, products. Okay. So let's go and insert one record into products table first. Okay. So let's look at what the product table has. I'm just going to do one thing. So I have the product table here. I hope you guys are following. Let me know if it is too fast or if it's not clear. Okay. So in the products table, I have only one product, P1, which is savings. Now I want to insert loan, so that my last transaction record, which was basically failing because I was trying to insert account type loan, I want to make it success. So first of all, I need to add a new product. So I'm just going to say insert into products. I'll say values, and I'll say P2, and I'll say this is loan, and I'll say product description, I'll keep it null for now. Okay, and I'll insert this record, and now you can see there are two records in product. And now when I run this accounts table, now it's working fine. Previously it gave a foreign key constraint error. Now it's working fine because this loan was is an account type, which is basically referencing a master table, that is this products table. Now in the master table that loan is present, so it's working fine. Now finally, if I come back to my transaction, if I try to insert this, you can see this is working fine as well. Okay, so this is basically how constraints will make sure that will help you to avoid inserting redundant data or basically wrong data. Okay, so this is why constraints are very useful, very important, and you need to understand how foreign key works. Now, how I got an error when I was trying to insert a record, because one of the column from the table was referencing to some other master table. So whenever I'm trying to insert a record, I have to make sure that the master table has all the records first, and then only I can load it into the child table. Okay, so I hope all of this is clear. So what I'm going to do is I'll just, because I need to share all of this with you. So I don't need commit today because I have the auto commit here. Okay, so this is all about default and uh, composite foreign key. Now, one more constraint that I wanted to talk about is it's basically called as an identity, basically a generated by identity column. Okay. Now, what happens is in many cases when and this happen, this we use all the time whenever you're working on a real time project, or when you are basically trying to insert create some table and insert thousands of records into that table, and you might have multiple different operations, and after a few days again you might want to insert some records, and you might do some deletes from that table. You might have a lot of operations going on a table. In that case, it's always better that whatever primary key column that you have created, you make it auto generated. Okay, when I say auto generated, it means that every time you insert a record into that table, you don't have to worry about the unique identifier or the primary key column for that particular table. So for example, let me try to explain that. I have this particular table that is transaction ID. right? So this transaction ID, now let's say I manually inserted like what, 4 or 5 records. So that is why I have basically made sure that I have a unique ID here. Okay, but in many cases we would be inserting thousands of records. So instead of just making this column as a primary key column, I can add an additional constraint here, that is the identity, make it an identity column. So how I can do that is I can just tell this one, so generated, I can do it like this, generated by default as identity. I hope the syntax is correct. So this is the statement, and I think this will work fine in Oracle as well. When it comes to Microsoft SQL Server and MySQL, the syntax is slightly different. I will explain that a little later. Okay. For now, let's try to create this. I'm going to drop the transaction table, and I'm going to recreate this table. Okay, so the table is created. Only difference I did was I added this constraint here. Okay, what this will tell is every time I'm inserting, it is going to auto generate the value for me. I don't have to manually generate it. Okay, so here now what I'm going to do is I will remove this particular column insertion. Okay, so mm, okay, I remember in the last class you told I should not I should not rewrite any of the scripts, but I'm just still going to maintain it here itself because I'm not rewriting. I just added a new constraint here. Okay, but for this particular case, right, I'll do one thing. Uh, I'm just going to comment out this. Okay. So I hope you are aware what comment is. If anyone is not sure what comment is, just let me know. Okay. It's basically going to hide this whatever script you have after the comment from the execution. Okay. So the compiler is not going to consider that during execution. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert maybe one record here. And since I don't want to mention this ID column, if I just execute this, I think this is going to throw me an error. Why? Okay, now can you tell me, I already told you that I created this table with auto generated for this particular column transaction ID, and hence I removed the transaction ID value from this insert, but it's throwing me an error. Can you guys tell me why am I getting this error? Anyone? Default value is not given. I have already given the default value here, right? When you say default value, do you mean this one? It has primary key. We need to mention column name. Okay, Ashish. So that is correct what Ashish said. We need to mention column name because if I don't mention a column name here, then by default SQL will treat all the columns of that table. Okay. So in this particular table, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns. So SQL will expect me to include 7 different values here. But you see, I have only inserted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values. Why? I removed the transaction ID, right? So in that case, what I need to do is I need to mention all the column names here. So I'm just going to do that. So it is transaction ID. I don't need to mention because it is an identity column, but I need to have transaction type. Then I need to have transaction date. Then I need to have account number. Then I need to have account type. Then I think it is amount. Then finally status. Okay, so now if I execute this, now you can see it's working fine. Okay, and in this script you can see I have not included the transaction ID column, and transaction ID is the primary key column. And kind of like if you have a primary key column, you can treat it like it's the most important column, right? But here I have been able to do an insert even without loading any data into the primary key column. And let's say I'm going to insert 2 more records. Okay, just to so online payment, current date, and let's say the second one is loan, and this is, let's say, 500, and let's say this is failure. Okay, and here maybe I'll make it default, and let's say this is 200 and this is loan. Okay, so I'll keep everything same, and I'm just going to insert these 2 records as well. So the totally 3 records have been inserted. Now let me look at the table data. Okay, so let's start from transactions, and now you can see that even though in my insert command I did not specify the transaction ID, but SQL was able to add some value into this. Okay, this happened because when I created the table, I had defined the transaction ID to be generated by default as identity. Okay. Now, what this generated by default as identity means is, if I'm not specifying a value during the insertion into this record for this particular column, then by default this value will get generated by this identity function. Okay. This identity function is something like, it's going to auto generate a value. By default, it's always going to start from 1, and it's always going to increment by 1. We can of course change it to start with some other value and increment by other values, but this is the most basic syntax. Okay. uh, is it clear, everyone? Have you generated auto numbers such as date? uh, I'm not sure if that is possible. Okay, so maybe we can try, but not sure. Okay, so I think we'll need to look for the syntax. So Ashish, can you try to do that? Can you try to create the same table, and instead of just passing this identity function value, right? Can you also maybe include today's date, current date? Okay, just try to do that, and maybe you can share the script. Okay. Big serial auto increment same. Okay, so good question from Rahul. Now, I think this concept, right, was introduced in PostgreSQL, I think from version 10 or something. Okay, but prior to that, we could do the same thing by using another data type called as serial. Okay, serial or big serial. So, for example, let's do one thing. Okay, if I'm going to create table, let's say I'm going to create a test table. I'll say id, and here I will say serial, and then I'll say name, and this will be, let's say, varchar, and I'm not going to provide any size. This will work only in PostgreSQL. In other databases you need to provide the size. Okay, I'm just going to create this table, and let's say I'm going to insert some record into this table. Insert into test, and I'll say name, values, and I'll say tfq. Okay, and I'll execute this. I'll execute it multiple times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I have executed this insert command 5 times. Okay, and if you see now, select star from test, you can see again it's basically doing the same thing. Okay, so you can use serial. It's basically kind of does the same thing, but in the latest version of PostgreSQL, it is recommended that instead of serial, you should be using this generated by identity column. Okay, so they're all for auto increments only. Okay, now in PostgreSQL and in Oracle, this syntax will work absolutely fine, but when it comes to MySQL, we have a different syntax. Okay, and I'm going to share the syntax for MySQL. um, should I connect to MySQL? Let me try connect. Okay, so I have MySQL here. I think this database is empty, but because I have not used it, uh, so what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to create this table. Okay, so I'll not use serial. Just for someone who may be using MySQL, I'll just show it to you. Let me know if I don't know how I can zoom in. Okay, I hope you can still see it. So what I'm going to do is, it is ID, and let's say I'm going to say auto increment. Okay, and name is varchar of, let's say, 20, and let's see if this works. Okay, so I'll select this and I'll execute this. So I think, did it throw an error? Create table, you have an error in your SQL syntax. Auto increment, is this not the correct syntax? Is it? Oh, sorry. I did not provide the data type. So the data type is, let's say, int. Okay. And now I'm going to select this and I'm going to execute this. Again, same error, node database. Oh, okay, database is. So in MySQL, right, whenever you are working, you need to first mention which database you are going to be working on. Okay, so I think I have not created a database here. Okay, so I'll just use demo. So what I can say is use, sorry, sys. So I'll execute this, use sys. So now by default, whatever I do in this session, it will be using the sys database. Now let me create this table. Again, I'm getting an error, incorrect table definition. create table, table name, ID, and auto increment. Anyone here? Maybe only one column. It must be defined as a key. There can only be one auto column. Okay, okay. So I need to, I think, make this as primary key. So I'll say primary key and let me execute this. Now the table is created. So I think in MySQL, we can auto populate a value using auto increment function, but I think it has to always be a primary key. Okay, as you saw. Now let me try to insert some record into this. Again, I'll try to insert the same record. So 1, 2, 3. So I executed it thrice. And now let me see, select star from test, and it works fine. So you can see the values, right? So this is how it works in MySQL. Now, unfortunately, in my system, right, I have not installed Microsoft SQL Server yet, but I will be installing it probably this weekend. And after that, I will show you if there is any changes in uh, other databases. I'll try to connect and I'll show it to you. Okay, but just to explain it to you, in Microsoft SQL Server, if you had to create the same table, okay, so let's say if I have to do the same thing in Microsoft SQL Server, then the syntax would be, I'll just write it here. Okay. So syntax for MS SQL, okay, Microsoft SQL Server is, you need to say ID primary key, and here you can say identity 1, 1. Okay. So one basically means start with one and increment by one. You can of course give different numbers here. Okay. And I think this is the syntax. So if you are using Microsoft SQL Server, you just need to use identity, open the parenthesis, and then you give the start number and the increment by value. If you are using MySQL, then you need to use the auto increment. And if you are using PostgreSQL or Oracle, then you can basically use this generated by default as identity. Okay. Now there are certain variations that you can do to this. For example, here I can open a bracket and I can say start with and increment by, but I'll not do that because every single syntax I cannot explain because there are so many variations in different syntax, and if I try to explain everything, it's going to take a lot of time. The best part is you have to go and you have to practice it. When you're practicing it, instead of by default, you can also give generated always, and then you see what is the difference, how it works. Okay. um, so all that you can experiment on your own. Okay, so I hope this is all clear. I think with this I have completely finished all the constraint that I wanted to cover. If you have any questions, you can ask me now. So we are almost 30 minutes into the class. If you have any questions, let me ask that. How to set prefix with auto increment? Okay, so Krishna, this same question was asked by Ashish and I asked him to try it on his own. So he said he will try. Maybe you can try as well, and I'm sure Ashish is going to try and share his solution in Telegram. Okay, so we'll wait for Ashish to come back on that. Now I see there are 24 questions asked in this tab. So had you breakfast? No, bro, I did not have it. Please show us how to download. Okay, so I already answered that. Will we cover graphs? No, I will not cover. How to check primary key and foreign key for the given set of tables in a database? Okay, good question from Sridhar. Now in Oracle, right, I know how to check that. So for example, let's say I'm going to connect to an SQL developer. Okay. Um, I'm going to answer your questions in Oracle first, and then for other RDBMS, let's try to Google it. Okay. Uh, I'll just show you how you can find all of these details. So I am going to connect to my Oracle. Okay. Okay. So let's say I want to find, your question is how to check primary key and foreign key consent for a given set of tables. I think in Oracle we have a table called as user constraints. If I'm wrong, if I'm not wrong, let's execute this. Okay, I think currently I have not created any constraint. That is why it's not showing anything. So what I'm going to do is, let's do one thing. How many tables do I have here? So user tables. So we have all of these tables. So let's say I'm going to maybe create a new table. Okay. So create, or maybe I'll use the same syntax that I used here. Um, so I'll say transaction table. Okay, so I'm going to drop the transaction table first, and then I'm going to create it. And okay, this might not work because all the other tables are not related. So okay, so what I will do is I'll not have all of these. I'll remove all of these columns. Okay, so I'll just have two columns for now, and I'll make this primary key here itself. Primary key generated by this. Okay, so let's execute this. Table creation, missing right parenthesis. Where did I miss right parenthesis? Create table, primary key. Do I need to give it at the end? Let's execute this. Okay, so the table is created now. Now let's look at the user constraints. Okay, now you can see initially when we saw user constraint, there was no constraints, but after I created this table, I have created two different constraints, right? And you can now see constraint type P. I think P stands for primary key, probably. All the details about the constraint, you will be able to see it here. So what else do you have? A lot of information, but I think you'll also see some table name. Okay, like so transaction ID is not null. Okay, so in Oracle, right, if you want to find constraints that are created in for all the tables, I think this is how you can find user constraints. And then I think there are many such tables. Okay, I don't remember currently now what are the different tables, because I know that there is another table with which you can find all the different columns that are impacted for this constraints. So maybe this table or maybe some other table. This is how you can find it in Oracle. There are many different, these tables are called as, I think, data dictionary tables probably. And in Oracle we have user underscore tables, all underscore tables, and db underscore tables. Now I'm not going to explain the difference between them, but in PostgreSQL, right, we generally do that by using this kind of value here. So information schema dot tables will give me the list of all tables. Similarly, I think in order to find all the constraints also there must be a table. I'm not actually aware of that. Is there anyone who is aware what is the data dictionary table to see all the constraints? If anyone is aware, you let me know in the chat. If no one is aware, then let me try to Google it, and I'll try to tell it to you in the next class. Okay. If I forget it, just remind me in the Telegram group. Okay. I need to find that. So I don't want to Google it now. It might take some time. What is a command for describe the table in PostgreSQL? I think, okay, again, this question, right? I don't remember the syntax for that. Let's try, okay? Let's me try to explain. So I'm not going to spend more than 5 minutes to answer the questions, because a lot of people had issues that we spent 2 minutes of time answering questions. I whatever questions I miss, I'll try to answer maybe at the last 5 or 10 minutes, okay? But just to quickly check, what is a describe? Let's see if desk works. So let's say desk of test. Does it work? It does not work. Describe of test, does it work? I think we need to use PS, is it PLPSQL? PL, PLSQL, PLPSQL. What is the command line of this PostgreSQL called? So let's try, okay, here. Okay, this one, PSQL, sorry. So this is the, oh, I need to connect to the host and everything. Okay, then I'm not going to spend time on this. Okay, so I'll terminate this. So these two questions, right? I will come back to you. If anyone is already aware of the answer, then let me know. So how do you describe a table, and how do you find the constraints that are created in the entire database or in the entire schema, right? So these two questions, I will maybe let you know in the next class. Default constraints. So from next week, intermediate, yes, hopefully Sandrine, there is not Boolean data type in Microsoft. What data type can we? Okay, so Sandrine asks, there is no Boolean data type in Microsoft SQL Server, and the thing is, the same thing happens in Oracle also. I think Boolean is not supported by Oracle also. In that case, what you can do is you can just use a varchar data type, because the only purpose of Boolean is can store true or false. True or false. You can kind of do the similar thing in varchar as well. So I would say you just use varchar. Can we create two constraints in the same status column? You can create multiple constraints for the same column. As you can see here, identity is one constraint and primary key is another constraint, and I have created two constraints for the same column, so that is fine. Can current key reference a unique column that contains a null value? Yes, that it is possible, lay, because foreign key constraint can be created on a unique, on a column which is which is having a unique key constraint, and a unique key column can always have null values, so that will work. Please give an idea about default constraint. I already explained that. How to find for which column primary key is applied? I think the same question by Madhuraj. I think we need, there is a data dictionary table which will tell us all the constraints that have been created for all the tables in your database. I just need to find that data dictionary table. So we'll try, maybe I'll try to Google that and I will let you know in the next class. Okay. Um, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop answering questions here. So I think we are in this question from now. Can you please avoid questions? Now got it. Please avoid questions. Okay, so Sandeep already tells to avoid questions. So I'm going to stop here and let's get back into our concepts. So we have finished the identity thing. Now let's quickly go through this DML command. Okay. Now I just want to ask you one quick question, because I already explained this in the first class. I want to know how many people remember. Can you tell me what does DML? What is the difference between DML and DDL commands? This can be a question that you might ask, you might be asked during interviews as well. So I just want to know, I have explained this already, but what is the difference between DML and DDL commands? The most important difference. Yeah, the most important, what is the major difference between these two commands? Dealing with database object, DML has to be committed. DDL structure, okay. DDL working table, DDL you cannot undo. All of this, what you're telling is correct, but what is the most important difference? DML is not only for insertion, right? We can do other things also. Okay, in short, right? DDL is to do with the database object structure, right? The whole structure of your database object. That is, if you want to create, modify, drop or something, then we use DDL. But DML is to do with data. Okay, DML has to, all DML commands are going to do something with the data. That is the data that is stored in your tables. Either load new data, remove some existing data, or update some data, right? Now in DML, we have four different commands: insert, update, delete, and merge. Now this command merge, right? As far as I know, merge is not supported in PostgreSQL and it is not supported in MySQL. Okay, but I think it is supported in Oracle and in Microsoft SQL Server. Okay, but the first three, insert, update, delete, is supported in all the other RDBMS. Okay. Uh, I have already explained you insert, so I'm not going to explain it again, because we have already seen multiple insert statements during our class today as well as yesterday. I already explained you in the previous class. There are several different syntaxes to insert a record into the table. You can specify the column names, yeah, but that is not mandatory. You can skip that. You can also insert just specific, you can insert records into, let's say your table has 10 columns, but you only want to insert record into 2 columns. You can do that by your insert, by just specifying those 2 column names and then just giving the values for those 2 columns. Okay, so all of this you can do in insert, and we have already seen that, so I'm not going to explain that again. Okay, now let's focus on the other thing, that is, let's start with update. Okay, so I'll say update DML command. Okay, so let's look at one table first. So let's say I have this transaction table. So I have my transaction table. You can see I have 3 different records here. Okay, now what I want to do is, After it can happen that you have some existing table and you have a requirement where some of the data is wrong and you want to correct the data. So for example, I have, let's say I'm just going to take a simple example of amount. Okay, I want to change the amount of whatever these transactions are there, right? Wherever I have a savings transaction, I want to change its amount to something else. Okay, so if I have that kind of requirement where I want to change the existing data that is present in the table, I can use the update command. The syntax is pretty simple. I just need to say update, then provide the table name. Okay, that is transactions. Then I need to say set, and then I need to have a where. Okay, so inside the set I need to tell which column I need to modify. So here I'm just going to say set amount equal to, what I'm going to do is I'll just tell amount equal to 1. Okay, so or let's say I will make it 999. Okay, and where for which particular record you want to do the update, because if I do not provide this where condition here and if I execute this, okay, so what I'm going to do is before I execute this I'll just remove the auto commit. Okay, because I may want to do some rollbacks. So now let's say if I did not include the where condition, okay, I selected only update and set, and if I execute this, the update works fine. But what happens is, since I have not specified, since the only thing that I specified in this update is to update the amount column into 999, it means every single record of that tables, it will get updated with this particular value. So if I look at the transaction table, now you can see all the three records, the values have been updated to 999. Okay, now this is a very dangerous thing to do, especially if you're working in a real-time project and if your table is having thousands and millions of record. And if, okay, first of all, if you have millions of record and if you try to do an update, it's going to take, it's basically going to take a lot of time. But let's say you have 1000 record or few thousand records, and if you do an update and your intention was to update just, let's say, 10 records, but you forgot to put a where condition, then you will end up updating the entire table. Okay, that is why whenever you are doing an update, always may be 100% sure whether you need a where condition or not. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, let me do a rollback so that I'll get the original data in the table. So I did a rollback. Now if I go back to my transaction, uh, you can see that I got the previous data, that is I have 100, 500 and 200. Now what I want to do is I want to update only this particular record, that is the record where I have the account type equal to savings. Okay, and the transaction ID is 1. So I can, basically it's always better that you consider the primary key column. Okay, so maybe I will choose that one as well. So I'll say transaction ID equal to 1. Okay, so what this means is, hey SQL, so this is something like DBMS is going to tell, or basically your UI is going to tell to DBMS, hey SQL or hey RDBMS, update the transactions table and make the changes for this particular column, that is amount, make it to 999, and but make this change only where you have some record where the transaction ID is equal to 1. Okay, so this is kind of like a filter condition. By this, only those records will get selected where you have the transaction ID is 1, that is this particular record, and only for that record this update will happen. So if I execute this, you can see that it's saying update 1. I think previously it said update 3 because it updated 3 records. Now it's saying update 1 because only one record got updated. And now if I look at my transaction table, you can see only this, where the transaction ID was 1, it got updated to 999. Everything, all the other records are still the same. Okay, so this is what update does. Now, one more additional thing here is, it's not mandatory that you can update only one column at a time. You can update multiple columns at a time. So if you want to update multiple columns at a time, inside your set operator, you just need to put a comma here and you need to mention the other columns that you want to update. So for example, let's say I want to update the transaction date. So trns date equal to, I'm just going to provide current date. Okay, so this current date is a function that will return you the today's date in my system. Okay, so again I'm going to say transaction ID equal to 1. So if I execute this and update is successful, if I look at this transaction table, you can see here now the amount is still 999 because previously also it was 999. It again updated to the same value. And the transaction date, did it not update transaction date 8/1? What is the date today? Oh, today's date is anyways transaction 8/10 only, right? So what I'm going to do is, maybe not today's date. I'll I'll consider some other date. Okay, so I can use a function to date. So I'm just going to say some other date, maybe 0101 2020. Okay, and here I'll just say DDMM1234. Okay, so now let me execute this. So the update is fine. Now let's look at the data in the transaction. And now you can see the transaction date is also updated to 1st Jan 2020. Okay, so this is what update does. I think there is nothing too complex about this. It is pretty simple. So I'm not going to explain much. Is there any doubt about update? Anyone? Is it not? Is anyone having any confusion with update? If no confusion about update, let's move on to the next one. Okay, of course, when I'm going to be doing some other data sets and everything, we will be using all of this DML and other commands. So don't think that this is only time we are going to be using update. We might be using it in the future as well. Okay, so for now, I think my auto commit is disabled, right? So let me do a commit manually. Okay, so all the changes are committed. Now let's go into the next command, that is delete command. Okay, now we all know what delete does, right? I already explained it in, I think, in the previous session. Delete is when you want to remove the record from your table. So for example, again, I'm going to go and use this transaction table. So in my transaction, current transaction is aborted. I don't know why this keeps happening whenever um, I think this is some bug in the PG admin tool. So I'm going to keep the auto commit on. And now let's say I execute this. Okay. So I think whenever we disable this auto commit, some weird things happen, or I don't know, we need to do something else. Generally, when we are working on real time projects, we would never have auto commit kind of feature. We would always manually need to do a commit. Okay. Because only when we know that the transaction that we have done is exactly as per our requirement, only then we do a commit. If there is any issue, then we have an option of doing a rollback, right? Uh, so, okay, now let's come back to this delete statement. So I have these three records here. Now, what does a delete do? Very simple, right? If I want to remove any data from the table, okay, then I can use delete. Okay. Now, if in order to use delete, the syntax is pretty simple. I can just tell delete from the table name transactions. Okay. I can do this as it is. Okay. So if I do this, what will happen is it's going to delete all the record. Okay. But I can also do one more thing, that this delete from transactions, where I'll say trns id equal to 1. Okay. So again, right, I'll disable this auto commit because once I delete, I may want to get back the old data. So you can do delete in two different ways. Either you can just specify delete from table name. In this case, every single record from that table will get deleted. Okay, so this will be very similar to what a truncate does. Okay, so the result will be the same. Truncate also will remove every data from the table. Delete from the table name itself will also remove all the record from the table. But if you want to remove only specific records from the table, then you can provide a where condition. Okay, where condition is basically something like a filter condition. What this will do is only the records which will satisfy this condition will get deleted. Okay, so for example, let's say I'm going to delete from transaction. So you can see I'm getting delete 3. This means every record from the table is deleted. So if I go back to my transaction table, you can see now there are no records. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a rollback here. I'll do a rollback. And now if I look at my transaction table, I will get back all that data, because since I have removed auto commit, none of the transactions what I did was saved permanently into the database. So when I did a rollback, whatever things were not committed to the database, it basically did an undo. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this command, delete from transactions, where transaction ID equal to 1. Now you can see it's telling delete 1, meaning that only one record was deleted. So if I go and check the select star from transactions, you can see only that particular record where the transaction ID was 1 was deleted. Okay. So now I'm going to do a commit, and I think that's all. I'll remove the auto commit here. Okay. Now if I look at my transaction table, only two records are present. Okay. So this is all about delete. Now the important thing is we have another command called as truncate. Okay. Now truncate is a DDL command. Okay. Now, truncate will also do exactly same thing that your delete will do. The only difference is in delete, we can delete either all the records or you can delete few records depending on what you have provided in your filter condition, that is in your where condition. Okay. If you want to delete every record, then you don't provide the where condition, you just provide delete from the table name. Okay. Now, truncate does not have this feature of deleting few records. Truncate will always remove every record from the table. So for example, if I do a truncate table transactions and I say where transaction ID equal to 1, okay, this is basically not going to work because this syntax is wrong. When you are using a truncate command, we cannot use this where. So we cannot basically truncate or delete few records. Okay, so in a truncate, the only command that you have is this one, that is truncate table name, and this will always remove every record from the table. So if I run this, you can see that the table is every record from the table is deleted. And after truncate, I don't need to do a commit or rollback because it is a DDL command, and DDL command does not need a commit or rollback. Okay, only DML command needs it. Now if I look into my transaction table, all the data is removed. Okay, now what exactly is the difference between truncate and delete? I would say there are maybe two most important difference. The first difference is very obvious, that is in a delete we can delete either all the records or few records. In a truncate, it will always delete every record from the table. That is the first difference. The second difference is truncate is faster than delete. Okay, so for example, let's say you had a table where you have thousands of records, and if you did a delete, that would take a lot of time. But let's say for that thousands of record, if you did a truncate, it will be much faster. The reason why truncate is faster than delete is because of the internal mechanism of how SQL will execute a truncate statement and how SQL will execute a delete statement. When you do a delete, if it's having 1000 records, internally SQL is going to delete one record at a time. So it's going to basically delete 1000 records, so 1000 times. But a truncate internally does something differently. What it does is internally it will kind of just drop the table and then recreate that table. Okay, so as soon as you drop a table, every record in that table is automatically deleted, right? And that is why truncate is faster. Of course you cannot see that, okay, and it's not going to impact any of your dependencies or something, because it's, I'm calling it like a drop and create, but internally it just removes the structure from the database and it recreates the same structure. Okay, so that is why truncate is faster. So the two difference between truncate and delete is truncate is faster than delete because internally truncate kind of drops and recreates a table. Delete will delete every record one by one, and that is why it's slower. Okay, I hope all of this is clear. Yes. So I'm not going to be talking about spaces and everything, but of course, everything, whenever you do all of these operations, everything gets stored into the recycle bin. So it's same like how in your computer, right? When you delete something, you'll still find it in your recycle bin. You can restore it using certain commands, but if you want to permanently delete it, you can do that as well. And in this case, it is by using a truncate. Okay. Okay, so I think everything about this is clear. Let me go back to my slide. Okay, so I think DML is completed. Now let's get back. Now let's move on to TCL commands. Okay, so we only have half an hour. So let me try to cover this. First of all, I hope, because I have already used commit and rollback multiple times during my explanation of other commands, you guys will already be aware of what rollback is and what commit is. Okay, so rollback, what rollback does is it kind of undo. You can call it like similar to undo. So kind of removes the uh, uncommitted transactions from the current session. Okay, this is just an explanation in my own words. Rollback, it's similar to an undo. Okay, the control Z that you do in most of the other applications. It will remove if there are any uncommitted transactions. then if you do a rollback, then those uncommitted transactions will be wiped off from that session only. Okay. But let's say if you have some transactions, and when I say transactions, it might be an insert, update, delete. Okay. Um, what this will do is it will basically so what was I explaining? I forgot, man. Okay, so rollback will basically remove all the uncommitted Okay, I was explaining about transactions. So transactions are basically anything that is uh, insert, update, or delete. And if you have not done commit after insert, update, and delete, those transactions are still open. Meaning that if you do a rollback, those transactions will be wiped off. Okay, so any changes that you have done, it will not be basically saved to the database. Okay. Commit is basically the opposite of that. It's basically after you have done insert, update, or delete, if you do a commit, then those changes are permanently saved to the database. Okay. So once you have done a commit, then you, even if after that, if you do a rollback, there will be no impact. Okay. So that is why I'm telling, removes the uncommitted transaction. This is important. Okay. After your open transactions, if you do a commit, it is permanently saved to the database, then you cannot do anything. Okay. But before you do a commit, if you do a rollback, then all the changes will not be saved to the database, they'll be basically wiped off. Okay. So that is what this commit is. So permanently saves the changes to the database. Okay. Now this both are fine, I think it is pretty simple to understand, but what exactly, now let's look at the save point command. Okay. Now, can anyone tell me what exactly is a save point in your simple words, in your own words? So you cannot use TCL commands for DDL. You don't need to use TCL commands for DDL. Okay, because once you do a DDL, they are automatically permanently saved to the database. This is what generally happens in most of the RDBMS. I don't know if there are certain RDBMS where for DDL also you need a commit, but most in most popular RDBMS, after a DDL you don't need TCL. Okay, so what exactly is a save point? We can roll back or commit to certain point, um, like version control, page break, creating a point where you can go back. Okay, so Ashish tells creating a point where you can go back, kind of right, as we can create save point till a particular point, kindly, kind of a bookmark, right? Okay, break point. Yeah, so I think you're all right. Now let's try to understand this with an example. So let's say I have my transactions table. So I'm just going to have again my transactions. Okay, so my transaction table currently has no record. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy some insert statement. So I will insert these records. So I have this insert. Okay. So I have 1, 2, 3 records. And what I'm going to do is, what about my accounts table? So my accounts table. So my accounts table has 4 records, right? So what I will do is, let's say, okay, so okay, so I'm going to have a save point here. So save point, and let's say after two, I'm just giving some random names. Okay, after 2 transactions. Okay, um, so I'll just copy this, and I'll have another save point here. So let's say after all transactions. Okay, and then here I'll have some delete statement. So I'll say delete from, can I delete, because there is some foreign key constraint, right? Okay, so maybe I will do delete from accounts where I'll say account number equal to 1234. Okay, so this is my delete, and then here I'll say um, save point after delete account. Okay, and then I'll have another transaction. So let's say I'm going to have update. I'll say update accounts where, sorry, set, I'll say balance equal to 0, where maybe I'll, Okay, where account type equal to loan. Okay, so I just randomly created some transactions. I'll just zoom in a bit. I hope, let me know if it is too small. Okay, I'm just zooming in because zooming out because I want to have the entire script in one window. Okay, I hope this is not too small. If it is too small, just let me know. Okay, fine. Okay, so what I have done basically is just see, try to understand this from the beginning. Okay, I have my transaction table. There are no records in this table, as you can see here. Then I have my accounts table. You can see I have four records, 4 out of 4. There are four records here. Then I have two inserts here for the transaction table. Then I have created a save point. Okay, and I'm calling it like after two transactions. Then I have another insert statement into the transaction table. Then I created another save point. It's something like a breakpoint or a bookmark or something. I'm just keeping a track of that particular point in my transaction. Okay, and I'm giving a name for that. And then I have a delete from the accounts table. I'll delete one particular record. Then I have a save point again, okay, so with some name. Then finally I have some update. Okay, and then let's say I have, okay, so I think I will need to remove auto commit here first. Okay, and then here let's say I will do a rollback, or I can do a commit. So either here I can do a rollback or I can do a commit, or I have another option that is rollback to, I think rollback to any one of the save point name. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll just choose this, the last particular save point. Okay, so now this is the entire script that I have created. Now I want to execute it one by one. Okay, so I'll just, okay, so I'm just going to execute it. So first of all, I'll insert these two commands. So you can see insert is successful. I hope two records are inserted. Now let me just go and check in the table. You can see there are two records inserted, right? Uh, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this save point. So I'll run this particular line, and you can see save point, it's kind of telling it's successful. Okay, so this save point is created internally by the rdbms. Okay, then I'm going to run another insert command. So the insert is successful. Then I will run the next save point. So another save point is now created. Then I'm going to delete a record from the table. Okay, so okay, here I'm getting a syntax. Okay, this syntax error. Now let me execute it again. Current transaction is aborted. Oh, I think this auto commit ka some problem, man. Current transaction have command ignored until end of transaction. Mm, okay, what I'm going to do is I'll remove this delete. I'll just insert one record into the account save instead of this delete, right? I think because of the foreign key, if we try to remove some records which has some dependency, I'll get some errors. So I'll insert some record into the accounts table. Okay, so I'll just go back to where I had delete. So I'll insert a record into the accounts table, and let's say here also I'll have an insert. Okay, so I'll have 1 2 3, let's say maybe this is 999 and this is 888, and everything else let it be the same. Okay, so did the current transaction get aborted? Okay, what I'll do is I'll do a rollback. For now, I'll start again. Okay, so auto commit. This disabling of auto commit causes a lot of confusion in PostgreSQL. But anyways, let's try to do it from the beginning now. I am again going to disable auto commit. So again, I'm starting from the beginning. So I have no records in the transaction table. I have four records in the accounts table. First, I'm going to insert two records into the transaction table. It is successful. Then I'm going to create my first save point. It is successful. Then I'm going to create a third transaction into the transaction table. It is successful. Then I'm creating my second save point. It is successful. Then I'm going to insert a record into the accounts table. It is also successful. Okay. Then I'm going to have another save point, that is the last save point here. Then finally, I'm going to insert the last record into the accounts table. Now, totally what I have done is I've inserted three transaction records and two account records. Right now, if I go and check into my transactions table, you can see I have three records here. And if I go and check into my accounts table, you can see I have six records. So if I just zoom in this, you can see I have six records. Okay, now if I had done a rollback, okay, now can you guys tell me, if I did a rollback, what will happen? Okay, maybe I will answer it myself because we are a little short of time. If I did a rollback, it will basically, because all of these transactions, I have disabled auto commit. So I have not committed any transaction. So if I did a rollback, everything will be wiped off. So no changes will be saved to the database. So for example, let's say I am going to do a rollback here. So I did a rollback. And now if I do a select start from transaction, you can see again the table is empty. Even though I had done insert, because I did not do a commit, none of the changes got saved. Even in the accounts, previously there were 6, now again it is back to 4 because the 2 new record that I inserted, since I did a rollback, everything is lost. Okay. Now several times when you're working on a project, you might have a requirement where you have done hundreds and hundreds of transactions, and let's say you did 500 different transactions, and then you realize, oh, the last 100 transaction that I did was something wrong, something I screwed up in the last 100 transactions. Okay. but but uh, but what you had was, after every 100 transactions you had some save point created. Okay. Now what you can do is, instead of rollbacking the entire transactions, you can roll back up to a certain point. Okay. So now what I'll do is, I'm going to rerun this entire thing again. Okay. So I'm just going to select everything and I'm going to run this. So this time I executed everything at once. And now if I look at the transaction table, you can again see I have 3 records in the transaction table and 6 record in the accounts table. Now if I did a rollback, I will lose everything, but I don't want to do that. Okay. What I want to do is, I only want to roll back until, let's say, until here. Okay. So whatever transactions I have inserted, I want that to stay, but whatever accounts that I inserted, there was something wrong in that one I want to delete. Okay. Or I want to remove. So so in that case, what I can do is, I have my save point created after all transactions. So I can have this here, and I can tell, instead of rollbacking all the open transactions in your session, you do a rollback only up to this point. So SQL will know that this save point was created for this point. So until this, whatever transactions, basically after this, whatever transactions were done, those transactions only will get rolled back. Okay. So for example, if I execute this, you can see the rollback is successful. It was done only until this save point. And now if I go back to my transaction table and see, I still have the 3 records of the transaction. The transaction records are still not rolled back. Okay. But if I go to my accounts table, there were 6, but now there are only 4. Why? Because I did a rollback until this. Okay. So this is exactly what a save point does. Now, similarly, let's say I will run another rollback, and let's say this one I will do it for this after 2 transactions. Okay. So currently you can see I have the transactions, 3 transactions here. And now if I do a rollback to a save point, which I had created after creating 2 transactions, and if I execute that particular save point, you can, and now if I look into my transaction table, you will see there are only 2 transactions. Okay. So this is exactly what a save point does. You can create save point in between your transactions, and after a certain stage, if you realize that you screwed up something, or you want to do a rollback only up to a certain point, you can do that by using save point. Okay. And that is exactly what we have done here. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to save it into the notes file for today, so I don't lose it. Okay. I have already saved it. I hope this is clear. Is anyone having confusion about save point? Is or save point clear? Yes. Any confusion? Okay. So everyone clear, right? No doubt. I would recommend that uh, after today's class, right? Try to play with this. Okay. Try to do certain things, because it might seem easy when you are creating, but when you're looking at me executing this, but you need to execute it yourself. Okay. You create your own transactions, create your own save points, and then see how that works. Okay. So that is all about save point now, and all about DCL commands. What was next? Okay. So I think in DML, I forgot about merge command. So I'm going to quickly explain about merge command. Okay. So I'm not sure if we have time for DCL command. Maybe I will explain merge command now. So for merge command, merge is not supported in PostgreSQL and in MySQL, so I cannot use PostgreSQL, but merge is supported in Oracle, right? So I'm going to be using Oracle, and the same syntax will work in Microsoft SQL Server also. Okay. So for example, what I'm going to do is, Um okay, I need some tables for this. So, okay, I'm going to copy the table that we created in the last class. Okay, so I will just copy this notes that I gave you in the last class. So I'm just going to paste it here. Okay, this was everything. So let me try to drop all this table. Let's see if it works. Missing keyword. I think products table. Maybe I don't need to create products table. What is missing here? Okay, so let me drop this. My product is dropped, and I'm going to recreate all of these tables. Let's see if all the okay, maybe I'll execute one by one. Okay, so this is fine, and then let's execute this customer cascade. Okay, so this drop customer. I'll create the customer, and then I'll insert some customers. Intel does not match the string. Okay, so I think I don't need all those tables. So only thing that I need is I'll just create two tables, maybe employee. Yeah. So I'll not bother about all the tables because we are short of time and I don't want to spend too much time creating the same replica of the database that I had in PostgreSQL. So I'll just create two tables. So I will create the employee table. So let's say I'll drop this table and I'll recreate. Okay, so the employee table is created and I'm going to insert some records. So do I have some insert statement for employee? Okay, so maybe I'll just insert it. So insert into employees values. Okay, so employee ID E1, then first name Mohan, let's say Kumar, let's say salary is 5,000, maybe yeah, 500. Okay, and then branch code is, I'll just keep it blank for now. Okay, so I'll insert four record 2, 3, 4. So I'll say 2, 3, and 4. Mohan, James, Xavier, David, Smith, and Ali Abdal. Okay. Let's say this is 200, this is 300, and this is 400. Okay, so I'm just going to insert this. So the insert work, I'm just going to do a commit. I think here we don't have auto commit, so we have to always commit it. Okay, so this is fine. Now what I want to do is I have one table that is select star from employees. Now generally what happens is you might have certain case where you might be building a history table. Okay, so for example, um, every month or every now and then, I don't know, maybe once in 3 months or something, it might not be just for employee table, it might be for transaction table or any other table. You might want to create a history table. History table is something like a backup table. So you have all the employee details in your employee table, but let's say you want to create a backup table which you will call it like maybe employee history. Okay, and you might execute it once in a day or once in a month or something like that. So what happens is, if the history table already has a particular employee, then I don't want to modify that record. But if there are new employees who have joined the company and who is only present in the employee table, then I want to insert new record into the employee history table. Okay, when you have, so if the employee already exists, then I want to just update. If he had a salary increment, then I want to update his salary. But let's say if there is some new employee, then I want to include that employee in the employee history table. Okay, so you either want to do insert or you want to do an update. When you have this kind of a requirement, we can use a command called as merge. Okay, so in order to use that, I am first going to create an employee history table. So I'm just going to create the employee history table by just using the same employee table. So I can just say create table employee history. Okay, so I'll just say, okay, first of all, do I have an employee history table here? No. Okay, so I'm just going to create an employee history table and I'm going to use a different command here. Okay, I'm not going to use all that normal syntax. I'll just use the query here. Okay, so this is also one way of creating a table. Create table name as, and then you can provide your select query. Okay, and then here I want to do one more thing. I'll say where one equal to two. Okay, now why am I using where one equal to two is basically to make sure that this query will not fetch any record. Okay, and this table will be created empty. Okay, now I'm going to explain in detail about where one equal to two, where one equal to one, etc. when I come to the basic SQL queries. But for now, just think that I have created this table. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have created these two tables, and this table name is employee history. Now you can see here my employee table has four records, employee history table has no records. Okay, now my requirement is whenever there is a new employee join the company, a new record will get inserted into the employee table, but the history table would not have that employee. So in that case, when I execute my whatever my batch or something, I want to include that new employees. And let's say for certain existing employees, their salaries they might have an increment in their salary. In that case, the history table should get updated with that updated salary. Okay, so it can either be an update or can be an insert. In that case, we can use a command called as merge. The syntax is merge into, then you need to provide your table name. So I'll say employee history. I'll give an alias for this, like let's say H, and I need to say using which table. So you want to merge into this table using which table, so which is kind of like your master table, and that will be my employee table here. So using employees, I'm going to give an alias E, and I need to say on, I need to say how can I join these two tables, or how on which column can I link these two tables. So I will just tell E dot employee ID equal to H dot employee ID. Okay, so just with join. Okay, so merge into the table name using whatever, from which table you want to do the merge, that table name. Then you need to provide how are you going to connect these two tables. Okay, and then comes the main part, that is when matched. Okay, then I'm going to do so let's say there is an salary increment for an employee. That means that particular employee I am expecting to already be present in the history table. If that employee is already present in the history table, then this join will match, right? Because this join or whatever this linking, right, will match. And whenever there is a match, I want to do an update. Okay, and let's say when not matched. Okay, then I want to do an insert. Okay, so this is basically what a merge command does. Okay, I hope it's not too small. Now what I'm going to do is the syntax is when I say update, I need to say update set, and I need to say salary equal to what salary. So this is the history table ka salary equal to uh, history table ka salary, uh, or let's say I'm just going to say employee dot salary. Okay, so it will be employee dot salary. So and so this means if that employee already present in the history table, then I want to update the history table ka salary with whatever salary is present in the employee table. Okay, but let's say if there is a new employee and that record is not present in the history table at all, then I want to do an insert. So I need to say insert. I think I need to provide all the column names here: employee ID, first name, first name, comma, last name, comma, salary, comma, balance. Okay, this is all the columns, and I need to say values. So values I need to provide. Now again for values, since this is a record that is getting inserted into the history table, and I want to insert this record from the employee table. I need to fetch all of these columns from the employee table. So I'm just going to say E dot employee ID, E dot first name, E dot last name, E dot salary, E dot balance. Okay, what is E here? E is basically an alias for this table. Alias is basically kind of a nickname that I have given for this table. I could also do employee dot first name, employee dot last name, but since it's going to have too many characters, I'm just giving a short alias here. Okay, I think now if I execute this, what should happen? I have explained you. First, you missed T. Which T? Where did I miss T? Okay, let's see if it's giving a syntax error. We'll try to fix it later. But I'm going to execute this. Can you tell me what will happen? Now you can see that I have already explained you what merge is. Employee table has 4 records. Employee history has no records. So when I execute this, what will happen to the employee history table? It inserts, right? Why? Because currently this join condition here will fail because it is not going to match with any employee, because the h dot employee, there is no employees at all in the history table, right? So this is going to fail. So this will be, what this will mean is it's not going to match, right? Since it's not a match, it's going to come here and it's going to insert this record. Okay, so let's execute this, and I'm getting an error, invalid identifier first name. Oh, okay, so this is what you were telling, so I missed a t here. Okay, so now let me execute this. Again, I missed something. Okay, here again I missed a T. Okay, so now let me execute this again. Again, I missed something. Balance. Is the column name not balance? Oh, sorry, it's not balance, it's branch code. So branch code. So branch code, and now let me clear this and let me execute this. Okay, now you can see that four rows are merged. Okay, so this is what it's telling. It's telling four rows are merged. Now, if I go back to my history table, you can see that four records have been inserted, right? So now this is fine. But now I have one question for you. If I execute this again, what will happen? How many records will get merged? Can anyone explain now? Let's see how many can answer this correctly. You need to tell me how many records will get merged and why. If no, also why. Okay. Abhi and Suraya tell zero. Vishnu also are telling no record. Anyone? Does anyone here think that it's going to merge more records? Okay. Marcos tells four. So Marcos, can you tell me why four? Four records get merged. Okay. Adam also tells four. Adam, can you tell why four? Because salary will get updated. Okay, perfect. So that is the thing. You can see here, I purposefully left out the where condition here because I told you, right, when you're doing an update, if you do not include a where, every time it's going to update every record from the table. So in this case, what happens, this employee history table has the four employees. So this employee id all the four employee id of the employee table will match with all the four employees of the history table. Since it's a match, it's going to come into this update section, and in this update section, I'm just telling update set history ka salary equal to employee ka salary, right? So I'm not checking for any condition. I'm not having any filter condition. Every time I'm going to do an update. So now if I execute this, you can see that again, four rows are merged. But if I look at the history table, there is no changes. Why? Because in the employee table, the salary, I had not done any change, right? So this is what you should avoid. The best thing what you can do here is I need to add a where condition telling that where, I'll just copy this whole thing, where I'll tell the history salary is not equal to employee salary. Okay. So wherever there is a change in the salary, only then you do an update. Now, if I execute this, now can you tell me how many records will get merged? Okay, now zero. And that is correct. Now you can see that zero rows are merged. Why? Because this update, this where condition is going to check if there was a change in the salary. There is no change. So zero records will get merged. Now let's come do one thing. I'm going to do an update in the employee table. So what I'll do is I'll come back here. I'll update the salary. So update employee set salary equal to, let's say 100, maybe I'll say zero, I don't know, maybe I'll keep it like 999. Okay, where emp id equal to e1. So I have updated the salary for one particular employee. I'm going to execute this, and if I go into my employee table, you can see that I have employee one salary is now changed to 999, but in the employee history table, the employee one salary is still 500. Okay, now when I do a merge, it should merge one row. Why? Because this this particular condition here will satisfy, right? Because for one particular employee, the salary was different between the history and the employee table, and that is got updated. Now if I look at the employee history table, you can see here this employee one is now having the salary of 999. Okay, so if I had inserted a new record, then what it would do is it would insert a new record into the employee history table. Okay, so this is exactly what a merge command does. I'm going to copy this. Okay, I'll commit this. I'm going to copy this and I'll put it into the notes file that I'm going to be sharing after the class. So I'll paste it here. Just a minute. Okay, so merge command in Oracle So I think that's all about merge. I hope merge is clear. Commit you forgot. Yeah, I did a commit here. So you have this shortcut button here, right? So I just clicked on this and I did a commit. Okay, so okay, I think the time is already up. I still did not cover what. So I have finished all the DML, DDL, TCL. The last thing that I need to cover is DCL, right? Grant and revoke. Okay. So I think I don't need much time for this, but I will be covering this in the next class. Okay. So I think that's all I have for this class. I'm going to look at the Q&A and try to answer some questions for the next 5 to 10 minutes. But if you are not interested in any of the question and answers, you can drop. Okay. I hope the class today was useful. You learned something. We'll continue tomorrow with DCL commands and then get started with writing basic SQL queries. Okay. Uh, okay, so let me go and look at all the Q&As. Okay, so I think I have a lot of Q&As here. So where was I? Where did I stop? Someone asked me to stop answering questions. Okay, so I think this was this, Sandeep. Let's start from here. How to find for which column primary keys apply? Okay, same question. I told you I'm going to answer that next. Please give an idea about default constraint. I already explained that. Can foreign key reference unique column that, yeah, I already answered this. Can we create two constraints in this? I already answered this. There is, okay, this one also I already answered. So next week, yes. What is a common command? Okay, this one I already explained that time. All, will we cover graphs? No. Uh, okay, breakfast I need to have now. DML is written over DML is written over DDL. If we use DML commands, we need to use these. Okay, please ignore my above chat. Okay, can you explain commit and rollback? I already explained. Can you roll back truncate? No, you cannot roll back truncate. Okay, so question from James. Once you do a truncate, it is permanently saved to the database. You cannot roll back it. Are there any best practices for when to use save point? Now, the best practices is exactly what I explained you. When you're working on a real time project, let's say you you built a script, okay, and sometimes it will happen that we might have to do some uh, work on a real time project in the production database, or maybe in the SIT or in the pre-prod or in the UAT databases, and you might have multiple different transactions, and you are sometimes you might want to execute all the transactions at once. In that case, save point doesn't really make any difference, right? Because you want to run all the transaction at once. But in certain cases, you might have a requirement where you want to run certain transactions, like in a group. Okay, so you have maybe 10 different groups, and each group might have multiple different transactions, and you want to run it one by one, because only after the previous transactions is successful, you might have to do some other task and then only continue with the next part of the transaction. So in that case, save point is useful. Okay, so can you roll back to any save point regardless of any previous rollback? uh, uh, so Adam, so can you roll back to any save point regardless of any previous rollback? I'm not very clear of this question, Adam. So do you mean to say that if you have done a rollback without any save point, and then you did a rollback to particular save point, then that does not work, because if you have done rollback once, then every transaction is already lost. Then after that, even if you do a rollback to a save point, it's not going to really help, because the save point will also be lost, right? So you should first do a rollback to a save point. And um, okay, I'm not really clear on what exactly you mean. If I'm not sure if my answer clarified your doubt, let me know. Okay, if you if or just try to explain what exactly did you mean here, or maybe give an example. We can update after reaching to any save point. You can do an update just in this PostgreSQL, right? Sorry, pgadmin tool. This auto commit feature kind of messes up all these transactions. But if you're using Oracle, or if you're using a tool which does not have this auto commit, or you can permanently disable this auto commit, then I think you can try that out. You can of course do an update, delete, insert anything between the save points. It is not the case every time the salary would be updated, right? I didn't get you, Balaji. What is the alternative to merge in PostgreSQL? Okay, so I'm not sure. Okay, I think there should be a command called as absurd, but I'm not really sure. I don't think so. There is merge alternative in PostgreSQL, but if anyone here is aware, let me know. So from next week, intermediate, yes, Does merge work in? Yes, merge will work in MS SQL. Now, how can we know which key should we use? Okay, how can you know which key you should use? It depends on the data and the type of data that you want to get inserted into your table, right? So every constraint has its own meaning. I think you just try to practice, you'll then get better understanding. Can you roll back to any save point? Can you roll back to any save point regarding us? Okay, Adam, can you explain this better? I am not really clear on your question, Adam. How we can see the entity relation between the tables? Okay, so this ER diagram. Hey, hey, if I remember correctly, there was someone who shared a screenshot of the ER diagram, right? Uh, I don't know who that was. Was it Bhavesh or someone? If I think he did a ER diagram, I'm not sure in PostgreSQL if I can come up with in PG admin, right? If there is a feature to draw the ER diagram. I'm not really sure. Okay, I have never done a ER diagram in PG admin. If anyone is ever, just let me know. Until that, I'll just cover the other questions. If I have rollback, if I have rollback one, then rollback. If I have rollback one, then rollback, then execute rollback one. Can I also execute rollback two? Okay, maybe there was a typo. Okay, if I have rollback one, then rollback two, then execute rollback one. Can I also execute rollback 2 and retain data? It depends on which sequence you have executed, Adam. So let's say you have this rollback. So you see here, I have done this already, right? I did two different rollback at two different save points. Just the sequence matters, right? So what did I do? I did a rollback for after all transactions. So after all transactions was here, right? So in this case, any transaction that happened after this save point is lost. Okay, and then I did another rollback after two transactions, that is here. So previously I only wiped off this much data, and then I ran another rollback which wiped off this much data. So to answer your question, yes, you can, but it also depends on the sequence. So if I had executed this rollback first, then I would have already lost everything from here, right? And then if I executed this, it would basically make no changes. Okay, so I hope the answer is clear. Evan is the tool, I think. Look at below one. Got it. Okay, fine. So I think that's all for today. I hope you found the session useful. Let me know if you have any feedbacks. Okay, could still use some help with a save point. I have a couple of questions in that chat. uh, Tim, did you ask any questions about SEPA? I did not see any questions from you here. Data dictionary is a default table that comes with Oracle database installed. It. I keep all metadata, multiple syntax in different softwares like Oracle. You cannot actually avoid multiple syntax because certain syntaxes will be specific to certain databases. So you have to use it. User constraint describes all constraint definition tables owned by current. Is a naming convention column length. Did I miss all these questions? Okay, so user constraint is a table that comes with Oracle, and I think Fatima already explained here data dictionary. So every database will have certain data dictionary tables, and they are a list of tables that will hold information about the database, okay, including the database created tables and all the other objects. Okay, so in Oracle, these data dictionary tables will always start with either user underscore, db underscore, or all underscore. And I think in PostgreSQL, you can find those tables by executing select star from information schema dot whatever the table names. Okay, so I think I am going to find a website probably which is going to list down all of these tables. If I find such website, I'm going to share it with you. Okay. Uh, okay, so PG admin has a tool to create ER diagram. Bhavesh, where is it? Is it present here? Or do we need to install something for that? Let's okay, maybe Bhavesh, you can answer here, or if possible in the Telegram group, or maybe I'll try to Google that. But I think that's all for today, guys. Already 15 minutes over the time. I'm sorry if I'm taking more time, but I hope the class was useful. So tomorrow, let's cover what was that last thing. We'll finish DCL, and and then we'll straight away get into writing SQL queries. Okay. So that's all, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording. I'll stop the sharing. I'll stop the recording.